The last rays of the sun had disappeared, leaving the sky covered in ominous dark clouds that threatened a heavy downpour. Claire hurriedly shut down her computer at the law firm where she worked as a paralegal. Her fingertips grazed the smooth surface of her desk, where stacks of legal documents lay neatly organized, a testament to her meticulous nature. Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming against the office windows with relentless force. She grabbed her coat, a worn but reliable trench coat that had seen many such stormy nights, and slung her bag over her shoulder. As she stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickered momentarily, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A shiver ran down her spine, and she quickened her pace towards the exit. In the parking lot, raindrops fell in torrents, creating small puddles that reflected the glow of the streetlights. Claire dashed through the deluge, trying in vain to shield herself with a broken umbrella that threatened to flip inside out at any moment. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement as she approached her car, a modest sedan parked at the far end of the lot. Finally reaching her car, Claire fumbled with her keys, her fingers numb from the cold and adrenaline. With a sigh of relief, she unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind her. The interior of the car offered a brief respite from the relentless rain, but Claire's heart still raced with a mix of adrenaline and relief. As she reached to start the engine, a movement in the rearview mirror caught her eye. A figure, indistinct and fleeting, seemed to materialize in the back seat for just a split second before disappearing into the darkness. Claire's breath caught in her throat, her pulse quickening. She blinked hard, staring at her reflection in the mirror, half expecting to see the figure again. But there was nothing. "It's just my imagination," she muttered to herself, trying to dispel the rising sense of unease. She started the engine, the familiar hum providing a semblance of normalcy. Yet, the image of the fleeting figure lingered in her mind as she drove home through the relentless storm. Arriving at her small apartment complex, Claire parked her car and hurried inside, eager to escape the oppressive weight of the storm and the unsettling encounter in her car. The hallway was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Water dripped from her coat as she ascended the stairs to her second-floor apartment. Inside, the apartment was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, rainy night outside. Claire kicked off her wet shoes and hung her coat on a hook by the door. The faint smell of lavender air freshener greeted her as she made her way to the kitchen to make herself a cup of tea, a nightly ritual that helped her unwind. As she stood by the stove, waiting for the kettle to boil, Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The silence of the apartment was punctuated by the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows. She glanced nervously around the dimly lit room, half expecting to see the fleeting figure from her car. The kettle whistled, startling her. She poured hot water into her favorite mug, its surface adorned with a pattern of delicate flowers. Holding the steaming mug in her hands, Claire made her way to the living room and settled onto the couch. The soft glow of the table lamp cast warm shadows on the walls, momentarily dispelling the sense of unease. But as the night wore on, strange occurrences began to unfold. Claire heard faint whispers echoing through the apartment, too soft to discern words but unsettling nonetheless. Objects seemed to move of their own accord. A book that shifted on the shelf, a picture frame that tilted slightly askew. Each incident was minor, easily dismissed as a trick of the mind or a consequence of the old building settling. Yet, as Claire curled up under a cozy blanket on her bed later that night, sleep eluded her. The memory of the figure in her car and the unsettling events in her apartment haunted her thoughts, casting a shadow over her usually peaceful slumber. The following day, Claire tried to focus on her work at the law firm, burying herself in legal briefs and client files. The office buzzed with activity, phones ringing intermittently and colleagues rushing from one meeting to the next. But beneath the facade of productivity, Claire's mind was preoccupied with the events of the previous night. In the afternoon, she found herself alone in the file room, a small, windowless chamber tucked away at the end of a long corridor. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow over rows of metal filing cabinets and shelves stacked with legal documents. Claire rifled through a stack of files, organizing them according to case numbers. The air in the room was cool, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the office outside. As she reached for a particularly thick file, the lights flickered ominously, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. A chill ran down Claire's spine, and she glanced nervously around the dimly lit room. The file slipped from her fingers, falling to the floor with a soft thud. She stooped to pick it up, her heart pounding in her chest. That's when she heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible above the hum of the lights. "You found me." Claire froze, her breath catching in her throat. She spun around, scanning the room for any sign of movement. But the file room was empty, save for rows of silent shelves and the flickering lights above. "It's just my imagination," she muttered, trying to steady her trembling hands. She gathered the fallen file and hastily exited the room, the echo of the whisper lingering in her ears. Back at her desk, Claire struggled to concentrate on her work. The events of the past night and the eerie encounter in the file room weighed heavily on her mind. She glanced at the clock, willing the hours to pass so she could escape the suffocating confines of the office. But as the day drew to a close and Claire prepared to leave for home, a sense of unease settled over her once more. The memory of the whisper and the haunting presence that seemed to follow her lingered, casting a shadow over her usual anticipation of returning to the safety of her apartment. That evening, Claire found herself pacing the length of her apartment, her mind racing with unanswered questions and unspoken fears. The faint whispers and unsettling events had only intensified since the night she first encountered the figure in her car. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights seemed to amplify her growing sense of dread. Unable to bear the solitude any longer, Claire reached for her phone and dialed Emma's number. Emma was her closest friend, a steadfast companion who had always been there in times of need. The phone rang twice before Emma's voice echoed through the receiver. "Hey, Claire, what's up?" Claire hesitated, unsure of how to articulate the fear that gripped her heart. "Emma, can you come over? I could really use some company." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, followed by Emma's reassuring voice. "Of course, Claire. I'll be right over." True to her word, Emma arrived at Claire's apartment within the hour. She found Claire sitting on the couch, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. The two friends exchanged a knowing look before Emma settled beside her, offering a comforting presence. "What's been going on, Claire?" Emma asked gently, her eyes filled with concern. Claire took a deep breath, her words tumbling out in a rush. She recounted the events of the past few days, the figure in her car, the whispers in her apartment, and the unsettling encounter in the file room at work. Emma listened intently, her brow furrowing with each new detail. "I know it sounds crazy," Claire concluded, her voice tinged with uncertainty, "but I can't shake the feeling that something is following me." Emma reached out, squeezing Claire's hand in a gesture of solidarity. "It doesn't sound crazy at all, Claire. I believe you. We'll figure this out together." That night, Emma insisted on staying over, determined to provide Claire with much-needed support. As they settled into makeshift sleeping arrangements in the living room, Claire found herself feeling a flicker of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to engulf her. Little did she know, the night would bring with it new horrors and revelations that would test the limits of their friendship and their courage to confront the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and the disturbances in Claire's life only escalated. Emma's presence provided some measure of comfort, but the whispered voices and spectral shadows continued to haunt Claire's waking hours and restless nights. One evening, as they sat together in the dimly lit living room, the atmosphere grew tense. Claire had just recounted another unsettling incident, the sound of footsteps echoing through the apartment when no one was there. Emma listened, her expression grave. "This can't go on, Claire," Emma said firmly, her voice tinged with concern. "We need to find out what's causing these disturbances." Claire nodded, her resolve strengthening. "You're right, Emma. We can't keep ignoring this. We need to confront whatever it is that's haunting me." The following day, Emma reached out to a friend of a friend, a paranormal investigator named Dr. James Harris. Dr. Harris was known for his expertise in investigating supernatural phenomena and had dealt with cases similar to Claire's in the past. They arranged to meet at Claire's apartment later that week. Dr. Harris arrived promptly, his presence commanding yet reassuring. He carried a bag filled with an assortment of equipment, EMF meters, voice recorders, and other tools of the trade. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Harris," Claire said gratefully, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. I don't know what else to do." Dr. Harris nodded solemnly. "Let's start by conducting a thorough investigation. We'll document any paranormal activity and try to communicate with whatever entity might be causing these disturbances." They began in the living room, where Claire had experienced the majority of the unsettling events. Dr. Harris set up his equipment methodically, his movements precise and deliberate. The air in the room seemed to thicken with anticipation as they waited in silence. Suddenly, the EMF meter on the coffee table began to flicker, its lights dancing erratically. Claire's heart skipped a beat, and Emma reached out to squeeze her hand in silent reassurance. Dr. Harris adjusted his glasses, his gaze focused on the meter. "There's definitely a presence here," he said quietly. "Let's try to communicate." He began asking questions aloud, addressing the entity that seemed to linger in the room. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The air grew cold, and a faint whisper filled the room. "Lost? Alone?" Claire's breath caught in her throat. The voice was faint but unmistakable, tinged with sorrow and longing. "We want to help you," Dr. Harris said gently, his voice filled with empathy. "Can you tell us what you need?" The response was faint but clear.
Escape, no escape.
As they continued to communicate with the entity, a sense of sadness and empathy washed over Claire. Whatever was haunting her seemed to be trapped in a cycle of despair and confusion. The investigation stretched late into the night, with Dr. Harris documenting every flicker of the lights, every whisper in the air. By the time they concluded, Claire felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. They had made contact with the entity, but understanding its motives and finding a resolution remained elusive. As Dr. Harris gathered his equipment to leave, he turned to Claire with a reassuring smile. "We'll figure this out, Claire. I promise." But as Claire closed the door behind him and Emma, the sense of unease that had plagued her for weeks lingered. The entity's whispers echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that still awaited unraveling. In the days that followed Dr. Harris's investigation, Claire found herself consumed by thoughts of the entity that seemed to have taken residence in her apartment. The whispered voices and spectral shadows continued to unsettle her, their presence a constant reminder of the unknown. Determined to find answers, Claire delved into research, scouring books and online forums for any information that might shed light on her situation. She learned about restless spirits, entities trapped between worlds by unresolved trauma or unfinished business. The more she read, the more she began to suspect that the entity haunting her might be seeking closure of its own. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by stacks of books and printouts, Emma joined her with a steaming cup of tea. "Find anything useful?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Claire nodded, pushing aside a book on paranormal phenomena. I think the entity might be trying to communicate with us, Emma. It's not just a random haunting. It's searching for something." Emma listened intently as Claire recounted her findings, the similarities between her experiences and those of people haunted by spirits seeking resolution. "So, what do we do next?" Emma asked, her brow furrowed with determination. Claire hesitated, her thoughts racing. I think we need to try to help it find peace. Maybe if we understand its story, we can help it move on." Emma nodded, her expression resolute. "We'll do whatever it takes, Claire. We'll figure this out together." Armed with newfound determination, Claire and Emma embarked on a journey to uncover the entity's origins. They visited local libraries, pored over historical records, and even sought out elderly residents who might hold clues to the past. One afternoon, they met Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. She welcomed them into her cozy living room, offering tea and homemade cookies as they settled in to ask questions about the history of Claire's apartment building. "Ah, yes," Mrs. Jenkins said thoughtfully, her wrinkled hands tracing the delicate pattern of her teacup. "This area has a long history, you know. Many families have come and gone over the years." Claire leaned forward, her interest piqued. "Do you know anything about a woman named Abigail? She might have lived here a long time ago." Mrs. Jenkins's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "Abigail. Yes, I remember now. She was a kind soul, always helping others. But there was tragedy, too." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "What happened to her?" Mrs. Jenkins sighed, her gaze distant. "Abigail fell in love with a man who promised her the world. But he betrayed her in the cruelest way possible. She died under mysterious circumstances, and her spirit, well, some say her spirit never found peace." Claire and Emma exchanged a knowing look. Could Abigail be the entity haunting Claire's apartment? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but there were still gaps in the story that needed to be filled. As they left Mrs. Jenkins's house that afternoon, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were closer than ever to uncovering the truth about Abigail and, hopefully, finding a way to help her find the peace she had been denied for so long. Armed with the newfound knowledge about Abigail's tragic past, Claire and Emma were determined to find a way to communicate with her spirit. They consulted with Dr. Harris once more, who agreed to assist them in conducting a seance, a ritual known for its ability to establish contact with spirits from the other side. On a chilly evening, Claire and Emma gathered with Dr. Harris in Claire's living room, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Candles flickered on the coffee table, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Dr. Harris had set up a circle of chairs, and they each took their place, clasping hands in a gesture of unity and resolve. "We are here to communicate with Abigail," Dr. Harris began solemnly, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "If you are here, Abigail, please make your presence known to us." The air grew still, charged with an electric tension. Claire closed her eyes, focusing her thoughts on Abigail and the pain she must have endured. Emma squeezed her hand reassuringly, offering silent support. Suddenly, a cool breeze swept through the room, causing the flames of the candles to flicker wildly. Claire's heart raced as she felt a presence, faint but unmistakable, filling the space around them. "Abigail, are you here?" Dr. Harris asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. A soft sigh seemed to echo through the room, followed by a faint whisper. "I am here." Claire's eyes flew open, her gaze fixed on the center of the circle. A dim outline began to form, slowly taking shape before their eyes. It was Abigail, her form ethereal and translucent, yet filled with a palpable sadness. "We want to help you, Abigail," Claire said gently, her voice filled with empathy. "We know about what happened to you. We want to help you find peace." Abigail's spirit wavered, as if caught between longing and fear. "No peace, no escape." Emma spoke next, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Abigail, we found something that belonged to you. A locket. We think it might help you find closure." At the mention of the locket, Abigail's spirit seemed to shimmer with renewed interest. She reached out, her hand passing through the air where the locket lay on the coffee table. A soft glow surrounded it, casting a warm light in the dim room. Claire picked up the locket and held it out to Abigail. "This is yours. Take it." Abigail's spirit hesitated for a moment before reaching out once more. As her translucent fingers closed around the locket, a surge of energy filled the room. The air seemed to vibrate with a mix of emotions: sadness, relief, and a flicker of hope. And then, with a blinding flash of light, Abigail's spirit began to fade. Her form dissipated like smoke, leaving behind a sense of peace that permeated the room. Claire felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, overcome with a mix of emotions. "It's over," Emma whispered, her voice filled with awe. Dr. Harris nodded, his expression grave yet satisfied. "She found peace. You did it, Claire." As they sat in the quiet aftermath of the seance, Claire felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The haunting whispers and spectral shadows that had plagued her for so long were gone, replaced by a profound sense of closure. In the days and weeks that followed, Claire's life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The once haunted apartment now felt warm and inviting, filled with a newfound sense of peace. Emma remained by Claire's side, their friendship strengthened by the shared ordeal they had faced together. Claire returned to her work at the law firm with renewed focus, channeling her experiences into helping others navigate their legal challenges. She found solace in routine, in the simple pleasures of everyday life that had once seemed overshadowed by fear. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the sunset, Claire reflected on everything that had transpired. The journey had been harrowing, filled with moments of doubt and uncertainty, but it had also been a testament to the power of empathy, courage, and the unwavering belief in the possibility of redemption, even for restless spirits caught between worlds. As the sky turned from hues of orange to dusky purple, Claire felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. She had faced her fears, confronted the unknown, and emerged stronger for it. And though the memory of Abigail's spirit would always linger in her thoughts, it was no longer a source of fear but of quiet reverence. And so, Claire embraced the future with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she had played a part in helping a lost soul find the peace she had longed for. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Claire whispered a silent thank you to Abigail, wherever her spirit now resided. The years passed, and Claire's life continued to unfold with a sense of peace and fulfillment. She remained in touch with Dr. Harris, who continued his work helping others understand and navigate the mysteries of the paranormal. Occasionally, Claire would feel a faint whisper carried on the wind, a soft voice that seemed to echo from a distant memory. She knew it was Abigail, sending her gratitude and perhaps a gentle reminder of the bond they had shared. And as Claire looked back on her journey, from the stormy night in her car to the quiet moments of reflection on her balcony, she knew that she had been forever changed by the experience. It had taught her the value of compassion, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring power of friendship. And so, with a heart filled with gratitude and hope, Claire continued to embrace each new day, knowing that she had faced her fears and emerged stronger for it.